As the long cold shadow of winter begins to fall upon the north, the Boltons attempt one final attack upon the Umbers in a bid to weaken them before the snows cease all movements. However, their campaign quickly descends into a bloody stalemate again, both sides taking heavy losses before settling into the now usual unspoken truce. Hoarfrost Umber and Rogar Bolton have become hated adversaries of one another, and their wars and conflicts seem to have no end in sight. One of the casualties of the war was also King Rogar Bolton's son, who was struck on the head by a weapon and made incapable. He is now considered a fool by many of the vassals of Rogar, though none would ever dare say it to his face. In the west, war erupts between the War King and House Glover. Galbert Glover, entrenched in the forests, ambushes the War King's beasts and warriors, wiping them out entirely. Enraged by the failure, the War King executes his own son and swears vengeance upon Galbert Glover, promising to raise a terrifying army of skin changers and wildlings to dominate the entire north. This victory over the War King is also short-lived for the Glovers, as their king, Galbert, falls to an illness during the heavy winter, and his son, Stieg, rises to power after him. Vayan Ryder strengthens his hold over the Rills, unifying the Pebblemen and repelling a vicious Dustin invasion, using the swamps to his advantage. The Riders trap and destroy Dustin forces in the mud at the Battle of Atwater, securing their lands just in time for the heavy winter snows. Winter arrives in the north in full force, claiming the weak and the unprepared. In this time of death and illness, significant changes occur among the nobility in Winterfell. Prince Rickard Stark finally consummates his marriage to a Hornwood bride, setting aside his disdain for their red hair. King Jon Stark, preparing for the future, declares a co-monarchy with his son to ease the transition of power once he passes. Meanwhile, Rickard Locke plays a masterful political game, accepting marriages from both the Boltons and the Starks, without either knowing that both had offered marriages to Locke. By the time the marriages are finalized, Locke secures dual alliances and practical independence for his realm, tricking both the wolf and the flayed man. In the far north, King Boromir Frost wisely avoids entanglements in these conflicts between Bolton and Umber, keeping his domain peaceful for the time being, his hearths warm, and his people's bellies full through the harsh winter months. The Skagosi also united their island under one queen during the conflicts that gripped the north. This queen, the She-Bear, is the new queen of Skagos. As spring returns, though snow still lingers, the north faces a growing threat from beyond the wall. The War King sends word to the wildling clans along the frozen shore, promising them land in the Wolf's Wood if they join his cause. With the support of the Children of the Forest, and bolstered by his growing power, thousands flock to his banner, forming a force unlike any that the North has seen in generations. Though he failed against the Glovers, the Warg King now seeks total domination, and unless he is stopped, he may soon rise to rule the entire North. And another menace brews beyond the wall. The red-haired Forester King unites the wildlings and declares himself king beyond the wall, and his intentions remain unknown for now, but surely it will eventually involve an attack upon the wall itself. The Night's Watch, sensing this danger, prepares for deep-ranging missions and warns the kings of the North that the North should be prepared for anything that may come from beyond the wall. Tensions in the Vale begin to rise as political unrest brews among its factions. In a bid to prevent war, Cerys Hersey calls a meeting of the mountain clansmen, including Hrolf Coldwater, the clans of Wetfoot and Rutley, the King of Belmore, and others, to meet in the clan lands of Bluden, a neutral meeting location. The meeting quickly turns contentious, especially around the aggressive actions of Corwin Corbray and the question of bending the knee. Hersey urges unity under her or Belmore, promising the clans that they could retain their culture and religion if they submitted. The gathering was then interrupted, though, by the sudden arrival of Torgal Tolet, Hrolf's zealot Andal rival. Bared completely naked and wild, Torgold challenges Hrolf to a duel amid the chaos of the erupting battle between Andal zealots and mountain clansmen. Torgold kills Hrolf in the duel and escapes with his severed head, even though he lost the battle. He believes it to be a victory, alerting Corwin Corbray of Hersey's supposed betrayal. Corwin Corbray rewards Torgold and swiftly issues an ultimatum to Cerys Hersey, accusing her of treason if she allies with the mountain clans. Faced with the threat of losing her land and title, Cerys concedes. Corwin then launches a brutal campaign against the clansmen, unlanding them, destroying those who resist, and forcibly converting their people. When Belmore attempts to stop Corbray, his forces are intercepted and crushed at the Battle of Bramble Wood by Corbray and Artis Arryn, whose cavalry aids in surrounding the routing Belmore army and the army of the feared crowned cannibal of the Western Mountain clans, who had now also been defeated. Despite the overwhelming victory, Corbray did not pursue the remaining enemies into the mountains, choosing instead to focus on what was happening in the south, where the Royces had also declared war and had laid siege to the land of the Templetons. While Corbray marched south, in the east, Lord Hunter wages a siege on Castle Rathmore to rescue his sister from a forced marriage alliance between himself and the Moonfells. Though Corwin Corbray wished to intervene, he is forced to prioritize the growing Royce threat to the south. As a result, the Hunters sack the Moonfell Keep, and Lord Hunter takes his sister back to his lands. The forces of Corbray and Arryn meet the Royces at the Battle of Nine Stars. Though hard fought, the Andals emerge victorious due to a decisive Andalic cavalry charge that breaks the First Men's center. The Royces are forced to retreat along with their allies, and Corwin aids Arryn in taking the lands of the Giant's Lance, the mountains owned by Top, and even grants him the province of Moonfield as he promised, as Lord Arryn becomes King Arryn of his new realm, becoming an ally of Corbray for the foreseeable future. However, winter proves harsh. Both Corwin Corbray and Yorwick Royce succumb to age and illness due to the winter, while Artis Arryn's forces suffer terribly in their newly conquered lands. Cerys Hersey also meets an untimely death by drowning during a trip by boat on the harsh seas, and her son, Humphrey, inherits her title, marrying into the last of the Shet's dynasty, a Shet princess. With the arrival of spring and then summer, hostilities resume in the Vale. This time, the Royces are better prepared. At the Second Battle of Nine Stars, Robar Royce uses massive pikes made of pine to counter the Andal cavalry charge. These pikes prove to be successful, and for the first time, the First Men decisively defeat the Andals in the Vale. The new Royce king, alongside his First Men allies of Redfort and Waynwood, go on to capture Templeton and claim the southern Corbray lands for themselves. The war ends in a First Man victory, placing the Vale at a crossroads. The Andals now weakened, they must regroup, but their fortunes may change with the arrival of Sir Wendell Tyrell from Andalos. He lands at Heartsholme with ships full of soldiers and gold, seeking lands and power, and potentially offering the Andals a much-needed resurgence in the wars to come. King Brogbracken and Armistead Vance launched their invasion into the Blackwood and Tully realms, aiming to expand their territories. Vance, newly crowned by his own volition and after being advised by the Grey Wizard Aubrey, sought to solidify his legitimacy through conquest, believing that naming himself king would tie his fate to some sort of divine favor or condemnation. His claim lacked clear purpose beyond ambition, but it gave him a mantle of authority in the eyes of his vassals and the knights that followed him, claiming that if he was undeserving to be king, then the Seven would stop him. In truth, he believed he was destined for greatness. The Realm of Mud united a powerful coalition of rivermen, houses, and the ambitious Andal warrior Jaime Faring, a man who will show to be one of the most skilled commanders of the war in time. After defeating King Christopher Mudd in a spar, Faring was offered the lands around the God's Eye in exchange for supporting Mudd in the coming war, for which Jaime Faring accepted. Both sides raised their banners and marched to war. Jaime Faring's first victory comes at the Battle of Tuskford, after the Vance forces passed safely through the Hog's lands. Vance's forces were routed by Darklyn and Jaime Faring's army, after the reinforcements that Armistead had expected from Marbrand were delayed and lost in the woods. However, the Brackens and the Tarbecks had better fortune, crushing the Mootons in the Bracken lands, and during the battle, Lord Tarbeck had managed to capture Florian the Brave, the king of Maidenpool, who he then delivered to Lord Vance as he returned from his defeat in the east. As winter approached, the full forces of both sides finally met at the Battle of Nesting Wood. Bracken and Vance forces dealt a harsh blow to the Mudds and Blackwoods, defeating them. A brutal follow-up at Iron Hedge saw heavy casualties on both sides, with Jaime Faring expertly leading the Rivermen Alliance to a Pyrrhic victory. Without him, it likely would have been a defeat. Yet little was gained beyond pride and devastation. Following this, a grim prisoner exchange emerged when it was discovered that King Brog Bracken had been captured during the Battle of Iron Hedge. Armistead did not wish to see Brog alive. He demanded that Brog Bracken was executed in exchange for him sparing King Florian and a vassal of Mud, Lord Charlton, who had been captured during the battle. Christopher agreed and sacrificed Brog at a weirwood, only for Armistead to betray the deal, only releasing Charlton and allowing Florian to have his head cut off by Vorian Viprin. Through the harsh winter, tensions deepened. The Mudds took one of Brog's sons, Edgar, as a future vassal, while Vance installed Yorick Bracken, an unknowing bastard of Hagen of yore, as a puppet in Stonehenge. Armistead Vance had intended to betray the Brackens all along, and the death of Brog Bracken and the winter gave him his opportunity he needed to overthrow the Brackens and place a puppet in charge and make them his vassal. Vance also destroyed Highheart, a sacred First Man site, and a sacred site to the Children of the Forest, slaughtering its inhabitants and razing the forest and cutting down the weirwood so that only stumps remained. An act meant to send a message of religious and cultural domination throughout the region. His cruelty had a purpose of gaining his Andal vassals' respect, to put fear into the First Men vassals that he now ruled over, to enrage his enemies into foolish actions, and to remove those who lingered in the forest who he viewed as enemies. Also during the winter months, Czech Horn challenges Armistead Vance to a duel in order to prove his strength against the Andals. The Andal warlord Armistead Vance accepted the duel, and the result was that Czech Horn was victorious. He spared the life of Armistead Vance, and then after drinking, similar to the situation with King Brog Bracken, Armistead Vance won over Czech Horn, and Czech Horn then agreed to come and fight after being promised by Armistead Vance to raid lands that he had never seen before in his tribe's history. With spring's arrival, hostilities reignited. The Rivermen Alliance launched another offensive, led by King Christopher and Jaime Faring, but Vance decisively crushed them south of Stonehenge, defeating their forces and sending them fleeing back into the Mud Kingdom, solidifying his control. Despite personal losses, including his brother Castor, Vance was emotionally detached from his brother for the majority of his life, having only promised to protect him to his father, though, now that he was dead, Vance even began to bed Castor's wife after his death. At last, Armistead Vance declared himself king of his newly formed Rivermark, a name symbolizing the Andal scars left upon the Riverlands. The Farings were landed by the Mudds at the God's Eye as promised, and for the time being marriages were held and borders secured. Though now peace has returned to the Riverlands, the land simmers with the bloodshed and betrayal that the Riverlands had not seen in likely many years. So many were dead, and the rivers choked with new bodies and swords that were swallowed by the mud to be discovered again in the future. King Euron Greyiron set his sights on Fair Isle as his first conquest before the arrival of winter. The island, long contested and historically tied to the Ironborn, was seen as a vital prize to solidify Euron's claim as ruler of the Iron Islands. House Farman had been persistent enemies of the Ironborn, making it a politically and symbolically important target for Euron to have victory over. To ensure the invasion was swift and overwhelming, Euron planned a sudden and surprise invasion, aiming to leave the defenders no time to organize a resistance. Before launching the campaign, however, Euron had to deal with a defiant vassal, House Harlaw. The Harlaws had refused to attend his feast or pledge loyalty after the massacre at Naga's Hill, prompting Euron to sail to Harlaw Isle with a large force. There, he was met by the Harlaw heir and his mother, who reluctantly agreed to bend the knee. However, after they insulted Euron and swore revenge, he responded by smashing the head of the small Harlaw child for their words of defiance, ending House Harlaw entirely. With this final act of dominance, Euron returned to his fleet and prepared for war, and thought on who should rule Harlaw Island next. The Ironborn landed at Clifton, on the northern coast of Fair Isle, and swiftly overwhelmed King Eric Farm's forces. Although resistance persisted in the form of scattered skirmishes for nearly a year, the Ironborn ultimately secured the island. Prince Erzin Grey'iron, Euron's son, was installed as Lord of Fair Isle, with a member of House Greyjoy placed beneath him. House Farman was completely destroyed. King Eric Farman was captured and executed, and the rest of House Farman would fade into obscurity, with none believed to still be alive. With Fair Isle under Ironborn control, Euron paused for the winter before turning his ambition southward. When spring arrived, he launched new raids into the Reach, while other Ironborn houses such as the Greyjoys and Whores continued to grow in renown through their own successful raiding campaigns, expanding Ironborn power and influence across the western coasts of Westeros. Queen Loria, under the direction, more accurately the command of Tyrion Lannister, Ronald Reyne, and Queen Elsa, began a large-scale campaign to raise a formidable Lannister army. Their goal was to prepare for possible Ironborn invasions and to expand their kingdom in the future. The efforts succeeded in creating a powerful force, but it came at a steep cost. The Lannisters poured immense wealth into funding their war machine, leaving their coffers often depleted and dry with an inability to fund other causes. While their realm remained watchful for Ironborn raids, dark undercurrents stirred within the Rock's vassals. Chiswick the Impaler Banefort secretly continued his Deep One practices and fathered numerous children, planning to indoctrinate them into his disturbing faith, while Tymond Lantel consolidated control over Land's Point. With the fall of House Kenning, the region was now lorded by a more conventional, culturally aligned lord, bringing stability even if lacking the flair of the original Harrig the Hornblower. In the spring, Ronald Reyne embarked on a diplomatic mission to the south, meeting with King Brandon Crakehall. Upon his return, Reyne brought with him the surprising triumph. Crakehall had agreed to bend the knee to the Lannisters. Though the details of their negotiations remains unknown, it is widely believed that Reyne's persuasion was masterful. The union marked a significant expansion of Lannister influence, just as ships, believed at first to be Ironborn, appeared outside of Lannisport. The vessels proved to be Andal ships, led by Sir Jasper Risley, who had been given safe passage through the Arbor, who arrived in Lannisport. Seeking land, he did not bring violence to the Lannisters, though. Tensions eased when a translator was found, and the newcomers were soon welcomed. Around the same time, the son of Vorian Viprin arrived at the Rock alongside Brax and Lydon. Vorian Viprin had recently perished in a tragic encounter with a cave bear, though. With the Crakehalls and Andals at their side, the Lannisters then launched a ruthless campaign against the foothill clans. Their leaders were unlanded, and many clansmen were driven from their homes, harassed as they fled towards the Reach. As the foothill clans sought aid from the Gardeners, thousands of Andals now resided in the Lannister lands. Their borders expanded, and with Tyrion Lannister now the de facto ruler, the fate of the West rested firmly in his hands and that of the Andals. With King Gwaine Gardner absent for several years, leadership of the Reach fell to Prince Mern Gardner. Gwaine and his companion, Lady Josera Crane, vanished into the wilds of Westeros in pursuit of the Children of the Forest, hoping to bring them back to serve as mystical advisors to House Gardner once more for generations to come. In the king's prolonged absence, Prince Mern assumed increasing authority over the realm, stepping into his role with immense confidence. Raised in Starpike, Prince Mern cemented his political standing by marrying Syldia Peak, daughter of Lord Gunnar Peak, a move sure to frustrate Lord Manderley. Mern had earned this union at just 14 years old by slaying another noble in a duel who desired her hand first. Seeking to mold the young prince into a worthy leader, Lord Peak accompanied him on a successful raid into the lands of House Valor, where they burned settlements and returned with the spoils of war, boosting the prince's reputation as a leader and commander of men. Upon returning from the campaign, word reached them of Ironborn raiders striking at Oakheart lands and attempting to raid at Red Lake. Fortunately, the Master of Arms at High Garden responded swiftly, ambushing the Ironborn before they could flee into the sea and crushing the threat. Prince Mern received the news with satisfaction, proud that the Reach had successfully defended its borders against the Ironborn. Soon after, a new presence arrived in the Reach. Andals, led by Sir Drox Dalewell, landed near Old Town. They were welcomed by Lord John Hightower and later introduced to Prince Mern. The Dalewells explained that they were in search of land and a new home to call their own. Seeing an opportunity, Mern accepted them for the time being and asked if they could accompany him in Prince Mern's travels to meet with another Andal king. His destination was the newly declared kingdom of the Rivermark, where he intended to meet King Armistead Vance and see if he was truly a threat or not. Before winter set in, Storm King Carlton Halfhand Durrandon declared war on Galladon of Morn, the Andal who had taken control of Tarth. With the aid of the Green Queen and her forces, despite Jon Crow abandoning her over the alliance with the Stag, the Durrandons launched an invasion of the island. They were joined by Baron Blacktide, an Ironborn lord who had refused to bend the knee to King Aron Greyiron. He had traveled a long and great distance to reach the Stormlands. Blacktide ferried the allied forces to Tarth and proved instrumental in matching the Andal steel with Ironborn iron during the invasion. Additionally, warriors from House Uller, Andal knights from Dorne, supported the campaign, helping secure the island before the onset of winter, as they were promised land upon the island as well. Galladon was driven from Tarth, losing all he had fought for and all he had built. In his place, Baron Blacktide swore fealty to House Durrandon and was granted lordship over the island. Tarth now became a strange fusion of cultures and religions, as Andals, Ironborn, and First Men coexisted uneasily. Following the victory, the Green Queen returned to her forest. During the winter, tragedy struck as her husband, Brock Wild, died in a sudden accident, leaving her widowed once again, though he had fathered her many children. Worse still, she learned of the destruction of Highheart by Armistead Vance in the Riverlands, which filled her with rage. In response, she took captured Andals from the Tarth campaign and prepared a ritual intended to curse the lands of the Rivermark for the desecration of her sacred forests. A disgraced Galladon of Morn fled north through the Riverlands, eventually reaching the Neck, denied entry into the north. When he arrived at Moat Cailin, where the Marsh King directed him west towards the Giant's Fist to seek new fortunes by attempting to displace the Ironborn in the region. In Massey's Hook, Justin Milkeye Massey continued his successful piracy along the Blackwater and beyond, though the Evenstars had not reclaimed their island from the Ironborn control. Massey's influence grew as his raids extended deeper into Westeros, making him a formidable force along the rivers and coasts. Come spring and then summer, unbeknownst to King Carlton, the King of the Reach and his traveling partner Josera Crane had begun to sneak through the Stormlands disguised as hermits, and aimed to make their way to the Green Queen in an attempt to meet her. War erupts across Dorne as Corgyle and Brimstone launch an assault on the Danes and Fowlers. In the searing deserts, their armies clashed, with Andals fighting alongside the native desert clans, and the Danes and Fowlers fighting with their own Sandornish allies. Yet the harsh environment proves to be deadlier than steel or bronze, as thirst, heat, and disease take more lives than combat. After a series of battles, the Danes and Fowlers ultimately are forced to relinquish their influence over the desert clans, losing control of the tributaries that once strengthened their control. To the north, the Vulture Queen intensifies her raids targeting her war-weary neighbors. As Peak assaults the Fowlers, the Queen's relentless campaigns grow bolder and more effective. With her enemies weakened and distracted by the conflict, she emerges as an increasingly dangerous power in the region. The Greenblood and the Ironwood kingdoms descend into war. The two forces meet in the Russet Hills, where the Ironwoods, though previously thought to be weakened, prove their strength. Castor Ironwood defeats the Greenblood army and captures the strategic castle of Brittlebush. While he refrains from pressing further into the enemy lands, his victory restores the Ironwoods' reputations and reestablishes them as a significant threat in Dorne once more. An injured lion is still clearly a lion. His success is celebrated by his vassals, marking a supposed resurgence of the Ironwood influence in Dorne. Following the defeat, King Willem Wade of the Greenblood succumbs to an illness, likely worsened by the strain of the war. With this death, the Lords of the Greenblood convene to elect a new king, and after much deliberation, young Edred Lake emerges as the chosen ruler. Raised by a mother who instilled in him the deep hatred of the Ironwoods, Edred takes the throne with determination and relocates himself to the Green Seat, preparing for the challenges ahead. His rule begins under a dark cloud, though, as Martell and Illyrian, powerful Andal warlords, gather their armies and set their sights on the fertile lands of the Greenblood, hinting at an imminent invasion.